It's just like when I was teaching prior, for the 24 and a half years, I loved my job, just like I love my job now, but I don't do it for the gratitude. I don't do it for the thanks. I do it because I love what I do.
Hello, I'm Eric Anderson. The voice you just heard belongs to Elaine Sutherland. She's the featured guest in Season 5, Episode 10 of YXC Underground. Educating people of all ages and cultures is what drives Elaine Sutherland. For nearly 25 years, she taught in schools, mostly as a kindergarten teacher, and helped her peers incorporate Indigenous history and education into their classrooms. Today, you can find Elaine at the Office of the Treaty Commissioner, where she is the Director of Treaty Education. How is she able to connect with people when it comes to matters of treaties and Indigenous history? We find out in this episode of YXC Underground.
Archive, so anybody that wants to come in and take a look at it, you're more than welcome to. But like again, I said, you can't take it out, but you're more than welcome to come and read it, and our archives department would also be able to help you out with that.
How old are these documents?
Oh boy, some dating back to the first numbered treaties, I would say, go back to 1811-ish, like beginning 1800s when the first numbered treaties, or the pre-number treaty started. But there's a lot of oral history in here from videotapes of the elders that they're now digitizing, because all the oral history.
Welcome to the Office of the Treaty Commissioner, which you can find south of Saskatoon on Grasswood Road. It's a warm Wednesday morning in June, but it's nice and cool inside the archives section of the building. Elaine is taking me on a tour of the room, which is full of primary sources relating to Indigenous history, culture, and the treaties that were signed many years ago. These primary sources come from across Canada and are in the midst of being digitized by the hardworking staff at the OTC. Elaine loves this room because it offers her a direct glimpse into the work that went into creating these treaties, and it gives her a chance to continue learning. The history of the OTC is really interesting. It was created in 1989 by the Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations and the Government of Canada to guide both parties through their differing views on treaties. For those unfamiliar with treaties, in Saskatchewan, they are the formal agreements between the Crown and First Nations with their expectations and obligations. 11 numbered treaties were negotiated after Confederation and between 1871 and 1921. They cover the territories from present-day Ontario to Alberta, as well as parts of British Columbia and the Northwest Territories. Here in Saskatchewan, there are 6 treaties: Treaty 2, Treaty 4, Treaty 6, Treaty 8, and Treaty 10. Saskatoon is in Treaty 6 territory. The Office of the Treaty Commissioner's vision in our province is to promote respect and understanding of treaties and to support treaty parties in maintaining and enhancing the treaty relationship through dialogue, neutral support, assistance with resolving disputes, and commitment to the treaty principles. I would strongly recommend spending some time on the OTC website, which you can find at otc.ca, as there are some great online resources available, and it's just really interesting learning about this organization. Learning is a theme in this episode, as it's something Elaine Sutherland firmly believes we should all be doing, no matter where we are in our lives. For the past 2 years, she has been teaching the importance of treaties to people in our city, our province, and across Canada. She left a highly respected teaching career to take on this role, and it has not always been easy. But you will hear why this work, why sharing the stories of treaties with businesses, organizations, and especially teachers, as well as strategies to help them on their learning journey, is so meaningful to Elaine. You will also hear how Elaine's new 2-day education session called The Treaty Learning Journey is connecting with participants here in Saskatoon and throughout Saskatchewan. Elaine and I sat down in the OTC boardroom, and I started by asking how she would describe her role within the organization.
When I was first brought on board, of course, my roles, what falls under me is treaty education, public education, our Speakers Bureau. And our Speakers Bureau is actually, we have, I can't remember how many, around 27-ish people on our Speakers Bureau. And people can go onto our website, and if they want to book us bureau in regards to treaty, in regards to reconciliation, in regards to Indian Act, anything that falls under that realm, like it's such a huge umbrella, they can book a speaker to go to their organization. Right, so that's what is all under my department, but so many others that are behind the scenes. So when I was brought on board, again, being Director of Treaty Education, TTIC fell under me, but that has evolved into Treaty Learning Journey, because, like I explained to you before, TTIC was 4 days, and when I came on roll, we tried to run it twice, once in June, once in August, and both times people came back and said, we can't do 4 days anymore because we're back in school, we're back in office, kids are back into activities, so it's not possible to do that. So, I kind of put my teacher hat back on because I was an educator for 24 and a half years prior to me coming here. So I put my teacher hat on and said, okay, how can I figure out how to make an impactful 2-day program? So hence the Treaty Learning Journey, Let's Talk Truth came into play with the of course, with the permission of Commissioner and her guidance as well. So what that is we take anybody, organizations that are not teachers, we take them on this journey. For educators, we take them on this journey with practical strategies on how to teach it. So we take them on before treaty, which is where we challenge your worldview, and not necessarily any worldview is better than any others, but I just challenge your thinking. And then we take them on kind of the general Indigenous worldview, because there's over 630 nations across Canada, over 50 Indigenous languages, but within those Indigenous languages, like if we look at Cree, we have the Woodland Cree, Swampy Cree, Plains Cree, like there's so many languages within each. So we take them on the Indigenous worldview, because if you're going to understand treaty, you have to understand who Indigenous people were prior to European contact, and the importance of ceremony, the importance of the pipe stem, of how that, when you smoke the pipe stem, when they do that, the smoke rises up and it's directly to the Creator. So anything that's spoken within that pipe, any prayers are said within that pipe, are now directly, you have your direct line to the Creator up above. So those are oaths that cannot be broken. Those are solemn promises, if I can call them that. So we teach them the Indigenous worldview, the medicine wheel, the 4 directions, the 4 sacred plants. We basically teach them about how they had their own distinct education, governance. Everything was done orally, passed down orally from generation to generation. We take them on that journey. And then for teachers, practical strategies on how to teach it in the classroom, because you don't want to teach the culture, you want to teach the education. Right, because there's a huge difference in that. Because how I always challenge other people is, as a First Nations person who's also was a baptized Catholic, I can't go teach on a reserve and give the host out because I'm Catholic. Right, it would be the same idea. Just because you learn about the culture doesn't mean you can go in your classroom and smudge because you might be doing it wrong. You might be not following proper protocol, right? So then that's the first half day. The second, we talk about treaties. So we talk about the numbered treaties, the peace and friendship treaties, the Superior and Huron treaties, the Selkirk Treaty, leading into the numbered treaties and what's actually in the numbered treaties. And then we again take that with educators, practical strategies on how to actually teach it in your classroom.
Wow. When organizations come to you, is it out of a place of like genuine curiosity, like or is there an admittance like this is something we, as an organization, we don't know enough about and we need your help? Like, what are those first conversations like with an organization?
Well, when organizations first reach out, I'll finish telling you about the Treaty Learning Journey later. Okay. But when organizations reach out, they basically, when I created this Treaty Learning Journey, we ran it with one organization in the fall. That was our guinea pig run, if I could call it that. And then Sask Polytech reached out and said, we heard that you did this Treaty Learning Journey, can you tell us about it? So Charmaine Gardner, who works with me, told them about what we created, the Treaty Learning Journey. So we ran it with them doing lunch and learns. And then from there, we had organizations from across the province saying, we heard about this Treaty Learning Journey. Can you tell us more? We'd want in because we want to learn about it. right? We want to learn about Indigenous people. We want to learn about treaties. We want to learn about breaches of treaty. And today, like everything that's in there, we want to learn because they don't know, because if we're talking realistically speaking, when we went to school, well, when I went to school, zero treaty education, right? When the younger generation under me, when they went to school, zero treaty education. And now that the treaty education is mandated by the Ministry of Education, I can tell you, coming straight off the front lines, there's still so many teachers that are not teaching it. And I mean, no offense to anybody whatsoever, but they're scared to teach it to offend somebody because they might use the wrong terminology, they might use the wrong language, and that's where they kind of back off from it, and which is I completely understand, because if you wanted me to all of a sudden teach the Russian culture, right, the Russian treaties, if they have, I wouldn't even know where to start. So this is just a lead into where teachers can turn around and comfortably teach this and have the confidence to teach this in the classroom, regardless of your grade level.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for explaining that. Yes. But I interrupted because you wanted to finish. What happens in the last day?
Okay, so
don't leave me hanging.
Yes, no worries. So on the second day in the morning, we do breaches of treaty, and we always give a trigger warning for this one because this is the toughest one, because this is where Let's Talk Truth comes into play, because realistically speaking, people want reconciliation, and they want reconciliation, but they want the sugar-coated version. Right, so now this is where we have the stories from our elders with the permission from them talking, and this is where a lot of the oral history will come into play as we talk about breaches of treaty, about how, if I talk about Treaty 6, it was negotiated and agreed upon in August of 1876. However, in April of 1876, the government had already passed into law the Indian Act, and that basically, where, if I can use the word handcuffed, really constricted First Nations people to extreme conditions, extreme living conditions, where their way of life, in treaty, it was agreed on that their way of life of hunting, trapping, fishing, gathering, following the buffalo was meant to continue. Well, now that completely changed, because now you're confined to the reserves. Right, so how do you properly feed your family when you're now confined to reserves? But not only that, but then they started the pass and permit system, which meant in order to leave the reserve to go hunt, trap, fish, gather, visit family, go to a funeral, go buy something for your family, you had to get a permission from the Indian agent. And according to oral history, majority of the time the answer was no. He wouldn't answer his door, or he would, according to the elders, he played God. Right, and also in regards to if they went to go sell whatever they were selling to feed their family, it was up to the Indian agent, because according to oral history, a lot of that money would go back to the Indian agent, and the Indian agent would decide, well, do you get all of it? Do you get half of it? Do you get some of it? So again, how do you take care of your family when somebody is making all your decisions for you, right? But also in that Indian Act was the creation of the residential schools, which was not, like in treaty, they agreed to have schooling, have education to learn the cunning of the white man, and that's in the terms of the government. The levels of education for settlers and for Indigenous children were a completely different view. In regards to treaty, they were supposed to pay for the salaries, the teacher's salary at the people's request, or have a school when the people on said reserves were ready for it. And as a result of the Indian Act was the creation of residential schools, and residential schools, everything, all the issues that that Indigenous people face today are all a direct, the root is residential schools, and how that affected the people there, but that's where intergenerational trauma comes into play, right? Because you have now the children that go to residential schools that are like you've heard the stories last year. I don't want to tell the stories here, because they're very personal, but the horror that these children faced, the levels of abuse that these children faced. They were physically abused, culturally abused, spiritually abused, physically abused, sexually abused, and those are stories that Canadian society, they turn around and I always go back, if it wasn't for the finding of the 215 babies in Kamloops, it was only then that Canadian society turned around and said, you know what, I think something actually did happen. Maybe these people aren't lying. right? Because our elders have been telling these stories for decades upon decades upon decades, and have always been told, get over it. I had nothing to do with it. Not my problem, right? They're not saying it's your fault. They're not saying, you had nothing to do with it, right? But that's just a black stain on Canada's history. It's our history, ones that should not be swept under the rug anymore. I mean, if I compare that to the veterans, and Justice Marie Sinclair said that perfectly. When do we tell the veterans, get over it, we had nothing to do with it? Why do we say that happened long ago? No, we don't. We celebrate them because they survived that. Right? If you think about the residential school survivors, they're called survivors. They're not called graduates. Right? So perfect way to compare the two, right? So we take them through that, but we also take them through the Natural Resource Transfer Agreement, which was where the federal government turned around and to Alberta, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan, gave them complete jurisdiction over the natural resources. But however, when they were talking about number treaties, oral history, they agreed to share the land to the depth of the plow. My musho, my grandfather, his dad was at Treaty 6 negotiations, 4 fingers to the depth of the plow. That's how much they agreed to share the land. Treaty 4 elders, 2 fists to the depth of the plow. We agreed to share the land to the depth of the plow. Other elders have said 1 fist and 1 thumb to the depth of the plow so your seeds can grow. So that's what was discussed in the number treaties, not to give away any of the natural resources. Our elders were formidable negotiators. That idea that they didn't know what they were negotiating was completely false. That was a myth, a stereotype that was put out by a man called George Stanley. He told the press that, well, they didn't know what they were signing. They didn't know what they were agreeing to because of the language barrier. So not true. They understood. They knew that there was minerals under the ground. But again, if I go back to First Nations people, they call the land Mother Earth. Right, so would you let somebody come into your home and hurt your mother? Absolutely not, same idea. So again, they agreed to share the land to the depth of the plow. Our ancestors knew that there was gold under the ground. They knew that there was colored minerals that the newcomers wanted, but they agreed to share the land to the depth of the plow. Right, so we talk about the Natural Resource Transfer Agreement, which was done without consultation of any of the Indigenous people. We talk about the treaty annuities withheld, where the government withheld the treaty annuities for 14 bands as a result of the Riel resistance, claiming you helped Louis Riel, now we're going to withhold your $5 or withhold your treaty annuity payments. And, back then they used that for things that they couldn't grow, for like tea, lard, flour, sugar, things like that. So the government did that for many years. And then we end off with today. The very last session is today, which we talk about the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People and the articles that go with them, the MMIWG2S and the all of the calls to justice. We talk about the Truth and Reconciliation and all of the calls to action. And then we talk about the 60s scoop. There's a whole pile, all the contemporary issues today. But after we're done all of that, then we talk for educators, practical strategies on how to teach it in the classroom, right? How to break it down. Because I used to teach kindergarten. All of these things my kindergartens knew about. Because there's a way how to teach it. There's a way to use that language. So whenever I went and helped educators in the past, okay, well now let's break it down to your level. Right, I'm going to teach you, I'm going to break it down to kindergarten level, and we're going to move our way up because it's easier to do that, to break it down to kindergarten level where everybody will understand. And then, okay, now let's move it up so your students can understand that. But also this gives, the best advice I was ever given in doing any of my teaching was always teach it like you're teaching it to your 90-year-old grandmother. How she can understand it. So I'm like, okay, makes sense, right? So that goes as well for a 4 or 5-year-old child, right? So in all of my teachings now, I try break everything down, simplify it so anybody can understand what this treaty learning journey is about.
I'm so curious about the strategies. I lasted 2 years as a high school teacher, but I'd like to share a story with you in a little bit. But you said something there about how some people want the sugar-coated version of reconciliation, and that just sort of stuck with me a little bit as you were talking there. And I'm wondering, like, why, Elaine, why do you think that is? And how do you overcome it so that you're not giving the sugar-coated version, you're giving the actual truth. But like how how do you overcome that when people come into a session or an education session wanting that kind of sugar-coated version?
Well, for myself, I'm very upfront whenever we're starting this treaty learning journey. Let's talk truth. I'm very adamant. It's let's talk truth. Like I'm not going to sugarcoat anything for you. I'm here. I put it back on them. You're here for reconciliation. You're wanting reconciliation, but now let's talk truth. So in saying that, when we do our treaty learning journey, we create a safe space. Like I'm very, very, I make sure that there's no blame, there's no shame, that we're not here to point the finger at anybody. This is just education. So basically, this is education from an Indigenous side of the story, right? So, like, if I'm totally honest here, the books in the past, like when I went to school, were written by white people for white people, right? So, like, maybe Indigenous people were a paragraph in the history book, maybe a page in the history book. That was as far as it went. So when I say let's talk truth, I'm very adamant that we create a safe space for anybody and anybody that's attending. And when I'm saying the non-sugar coated version, like when I talk about the Indian Act, I tell stories that go along with each section. Whether that be from my personal family history or from stories from the elders, like in regards to like one part in the Indian Act is they changed traditional names to European names. So I'll just use myself for an example. My traditional name, you know me as Elaine Sutherland, but my traditional last name is Sagapateo. And that's a Cree word meaning smoke rising from the fire. But however, they couldn't spell Sutherland, or they couldn't spell Sagapateo, so we became Sutherland. Right? So that was an enforced implementation of European names. That one little thing that's in the Indian Act, but when we talk about pass and permit system, I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you. I'm going to tell you the true stories of what actually happened to Indigenous people because society doesn't know. Every time we give this treaty learning journey, I always say, how come we didn't know this? People will always, no, I don't say that, but people will always tell me, how come we didn't know this? Right? It's because it's not in schools. When I say the sugar-coated version, when we're talking residential schools, that's where many people might know about residential schools, but they don't know what actually happened in residential schools and the extreme level of violence and abuse that these children faced. I mean, like when I tell these stories, like I cry because it still hurts, because my parents went through that. There's so many, my older siblings went to day school. We there's so many generations like myself that can tell you stories, of day schools. And that's not even at the level of residential schools, of the abuse that they faced. I don't know if I should go into stories here because they're so, it's very triggering, but at the end of when we're talking, let's talk truth, when we're talking all these stories, again, I go back, people will say, how come we didn't know this was happening? How come they didn't know when some of them lived, they said 10 miles away, that they knew there was a school there, but they thought, oh, it's a big fancy school that the Indians get to go to, right? But not knowing what was actually happening behind closed doors. So that's when we say, let's talk truth. Let's tell you what's really happening. If we go into what's modern day, what's happening today, MMIWG2S is a fear that as an Indigenous woman, fears that we face on a daily basis, but people don't realize what we still currently are still facing. If we talk about UNDRIP, which United Nations Declaration rights of Indigenous people, that talks about how my basic human treaty rights as an Indigenous person, it has to go into law before it is seen as it's now legal that my dignity, I should live a life free of discrimination, right? So why does that have to go into law before I get to live my life free of discrimination? It's extremely frustrating, but it's things that people don't realize what Indigenous people still face today.
That was a really powerful answer. And as you were talking there, Elaine, it and I don't know, and you you can correct me if I'm wrong, but is there a sense like when you were able to share this truth and to share the actual history with people and people that are saying, I didn't know this, but it's you that's sharing this. Is that empowering for you? Like how does that make you feel?
Oh, geez. Well, if I start when I first started my treaty learning journey, let's talk truth. Was I offending people? Absolutely. Like hugely offending people. And it got to the point that I wanted to throw the towel in and say, I don't want to do this anymore. Like I was getting so much flack, so much backlash from like, how dare you tell this? Like they felt that I was blaming them. And that was never the intent. It's just education on what our people went through. But I went to talk to 3 different elders, saying that, okay, like this is what I'm going through. I'm not sure what to do. And and if I can just be blunt, from 3 different elders, they said it's about damn time that our side of the story is being told. They said, Elaine, you need to keep going because the truth needs to get out there. This is our stories, that somebody's finally telling our stories. So it's a struggle, to still tell their stories, because they're hard stories to tell, because when people say it happened long ago, the last residential school closed in 1996.
It's not that long ago.
That's not that long ago.
No.
Like I was 25. So they were here, and so many people still don't know residential schools and the horror that happened to Indigenous people. Like it's crazy how society still doesn't know or still doesn't want to recognize what happened, and to say just get over it, no, that's a piece of our history. So when I go around giving this treaty learning journey, is it empowering to me? Absolutely. I feel like I have the elders and my ancestors behind me, that give me the strength to tell these stories, because they're hard stories to tell. Generally, I'll be honest, I usually cry at every single treaty learning journey, because it hurts. It's when people say, get over it. How can you get over it when our people are still suffering?
And I also think, first of all, I'm so glad you stuck with it and that you felt that you had the support to do it, because I know, speaking from firsthand, when you came to where I work at Sherbrooke, and you talked to our residents and our staff, and you answered so many questions, but you shared these stories, and they were incredibly powerful stories. And people to this day, that's almost a year ago, still talk about your presentation. When you, like, was it encouraging when you finally started to see that kind of feedback, where like it was the gratitude and the thank you for it, as opposed to the flack that you mentioned?
You know what? I am thankful that when I do get the comments, like, thank you for teaching us, thank you for your words, thank you for helping us to understand. But however, that's also not why I do my job. It's just like when I was teaching prior, for the 24 and a half years, I loved my job, just like I love my job now. But I don't do it for the gratitude. I don't do it for the thanks. I do it because I love what I do. My late dad always told us, it doesn't matter if you're a gas jockey, if you are picking up garbage, if you're a teacher, whatever you're doing, if you're a lawyer, do it because you love it. Do it with 100% and because you love it. So that's how I do my job here, is because I love what I do. I love helping people learn, whether it be if I was teaching kids how to read or teaching adults about the treaty learning journey and everything that it encompasses, So it is nice when I hear, you know what, Elaine, like you were really impactful, but again, that's not why I do my job, though.
Yeah. You would have, I'm just picturing you in the classroom, and you would have been such an amazing teacher. Was there a point, though, in your teaching career, Elaine, where you wanted to do something like this, or did this just this opportunity just appear to you? Like how did you go from the classroom to now with OTC?
If you would have asked me 2 years ago that I'd be doing what I'm doing today, I would have said you're crazy. Because I loved teaching. I loved it with my heart and my soul. But when this opportunity came up, I had to think long and hard about it, because leaving a career that I loved, and kind of for me at the time coming into, like, even though I thought I understood treaty, I was helping staffs and fellow teachers with treaty education, you know, making that shift over and how my life would change, right? Like I wasn't sure about that because, to be totally honest, you know, I had 8 more years and I had my full teacher pension. You know, so, but coming here, it was something that I had to think really long and hard about it. But Commissioner talks really good. And she's such a wonderful lady. You know, that when we really sat down and really talked long and hard about it, it was an offer that I couldn't refuse.
Yeah.
You know, so it's just I'm teaching, but just in a different manner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's you're teaching not only within Saskatoon area, but like you're teaching all over the place, aren't you?
Yes, whether that be the treaty learning journey or whether that be somebody reaching out for a speakers bureau to do a talk on whatever topic they're wanting, whether that be even land-based education or land acknowledgements, Indian Act, residential schools, whatever it may be, we touch people. Like since I started here, Zoom presentations going to Toronto, Alberta, but in person as well. Canmore, you know, like we've gone throughout Saskatchewan, north, south, east, west, you name it. We're all over the place, but it is something that is just amazing. It's amazing to see, and like I said, when we go to these gatherings, I meet new elders, and hearing their stories, you know, stories that again we're not going to find in the history books. You know, it's just amazing to keep learning. You know, I love it. Yeah.
That's such a powerful thing in terms of to keep learning. I think for a lot of people, we think, especially in terms of academics, we learn up until grade 12 or maybe university, and then we go into a job kind of deal. But I love the outlook that you have. Like you're always learning, aren't you?
Yes, absolutely. I'm a firm believer, you know, right from the time I was small, you know, it was ingrained to us by our parents. Our parents were firm supporters of education and how you're always going to keep learning. So it was ingrained in me from my mom and my late dad that no matter where you are in life, you're going to keep learning. So even like I'm in the role that I'm at, and I feel like I'm like a sponge that anything and everything, even if one of my colleagues is learning about something, okay, what is that? Can I get a copy of that? Because I want to read it, you know, because I want to read anything and everything. And it's amazing. Like I told you, I thought I knew treaty, but I'm still learning treaty, you know, so there's so much out there to learn about. So I always challenge anybody that attends the learning journey or any teachers when I go out to treaty medal installations in their schools that whether it be a session or whatever it may be, don't let this be a one and done. Continue learning, continue digging, continue asking questions, because anything that we learn about is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much to learn about. Yeah.
That's so inspiring. May I ask, when you, because it is clear how passionate you are about the work that you do and that you give and give. How do you recharge your batteries at the at the end of the day, or maybe after a presentation where you are sharing some very personal stories and like you said, it's hard history to talk about, but how do you fuel up again?
I sit in the corner and cry. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. No. Well, when we're doing the treaty learning journey, we smudge. I teach them about what smudging is, and we smudge as a group, and then we do a talking circle. So with the treaty learning journey, we kind of get all the ickies out that way, right? That is no shame, no blame. But personally, it always takes tragedy to let you figure out everything else is just small stuff. Right, years ago in 2016 to 2018, my family lost 8 family members due to old age, due to cancer, just natural old age causes. But then we tragically lost my brother in 2018, and this was within a 14-month period. So with what my family had to go through there, really made me have the outlook that, you know what, it's all small stuff. Life is just small stuff, and what my family went through, I don't wish that on my worst enemy. So taking everything in day by day, I always think, you know what, if I threw how I'm feeling, if I'm upset right now, if I threw my problems into a pile with everybody else's, I'd gladly take this back. So smudging helps, having that personal outlook. I know, but it took tragedy to have me have that outlook, because before I will say, I was very, my late dad, his appointment was at 2 o'clock, he had to be there at 12 o'clock, like 2 hours ahead of time. And that was so ingrained in me, and my sons as well, that we have to be early and everything had to be on time and everything had to be ABC, ready, set, go. But having everything that has happened to me in the past, you know what? Life is too short to stay upset. Life is too short to keep any hurt, any anger, anything that is not positive. What good does that do me? Right? So I personally make the choice to be happy. I make the choice that today is a good day, tomorrow is going to be an even better day. So even though I'm going through bad things today, in 5 years, is that going to matter? No. Right?
Thank you for sharing about that. I appreciate that. You've been very generous with your time, and I just have one more question for you. I asked this question as a former teacher who tried to teach treaty in rural Saskatchewan in the southwest corner in a town called Frontier, and it was challenging for me. Not so much in terms of the students were fairly open minded, but I had parents afterwards contact me and say, "What are you doing? Why are you doing this?" And it completely shattered my confidence to do that again. And so I'm wondering, Elaine, if there are teachers out there that maybe don't have that confidence to teach treaty in their classroom, what would you say to them?
Okay, so whenever the comment, again, it was exactly like what you were saying, where you had the parents giving the backlash, not necessarily the children, because they're eager to learn. It's the parents and the older generations that don't want to know about it, don't want to learn about it. So I always say, whenever anybody's going to teach treaty education, put facts outside on your bulletin board. Send home facts to your parents. Put a great big sign saying that this is mandated by the Ministry of Education. It's part of our job as teachers to teach treaty education. Send home facts to the parents. Send home facts. Put them up on your bulletin board. Every time you're going to do it, put it up on your bulletin board, but always make sure you have, this is mandated by the Ministry of Education. And put facts on your bulletin board. Send home facts to the parents little bit by little bit. I always say the future generation, the students that are out there, they're the ones that are going to make the true difference in our world today, because the older generations, they're the ones that we struggle with, if we're honest. But as a teacher, keep going. Little bit by little bit by little bit. Even if you're going to do, don't let it be a 1 week leading up to Orange Shirt Day. Don't let it be 1 week in November for Louis Riel Day. Don't let it be a couple storytellers for February Storytelling Month. Don't let it be 1 week leading up to National Indigenous Peoples Day. Do this year long. Do this every single week. If you have to do it for half an hour every Thursday at 11 o'clock. Right? Make this, just like how teachers have to make scheduling for language arts. You need to put language arts, math, science, social. Make Indigenous education also a priority, because it's in our curriculum guides. And again, treaty education is mandated by the Ministry of Education. That's your job.
I wish I knew you back in 2006. I really do. Elaine, I'm such a big fan of yours. I think the work you're doing is incredible, and I think you're just a wonderful human being. And thank you for taking time out of your very busy schedule to speak with me today. So thank you.
Oh, you're most welcome, Eric, anytime. Thank you.
My thanks to Elaine Sutherland for being on the podcast and sharing her story with us. If you want to learn more about the work being done by Elaine and the Office of the Treaty Commissioner, please visit otc.ca. This has been episode 10, season 5 of YXE Underground. My name is Eric Anderson, and I host, produce, and edit this local independent podcast. You can listen to YXE Underground wherever you find your favorite podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Good Pods, or the website yxeunderground.com. And if you like what you hear, please feel free to give the podcast a 5-star review. Follow YXE Underground on social media. Simply search YXE Underground on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And that's where you'll see some lovely photos of Elaine Sutherland taken by Saskatoon photographer and my friend, Molly Shakowski. Now, this is the season 5 finale of YXE Underground, and I can't thank all of you enough for supporting my podcast. Whether you're listening to or sharing the podcast, or maybe you're telling a friend to check it out, or maybe you're buying podcast swag that supports local organizations, thank you so much for your support. I had no idea this podcast would go on for 5 years, and it really is a privilege sharing these stories with you. So thank you for the opportunity to do so. I can't wait for season 6 to launch in September, and you might hear a summer bonus episode or two between now and the fall. Before I go, I would like to acknowledge and thank a few people. Thank you to Saskatoon's Danger Dynamite for creating and maintaining the website. And thank you to my cousin Andrew Dixon for creating the original themes that you hear in the podcast. Oh, and before I go, if you have any recommendations when it comes to people or organizations that you think should be featured on the podcast, I would love to hear them. Feel free to send an email to ericandersonyxe@gmail.com, or you can fill out a nomination form on the website. And you can also drop me a line on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. I know there are so many people in Saskatoon making a difference in our community who are flying under the radar, so let's get them on the podcast and share their stories. Now, before I go, I would like to acknowledge that this interview was gathered on Treaty 6 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis. YXE Underground, as my paper falls to the floor, YXE Underground is a production of the Salthammer Production Company. My name is Eric Anderson. I hope you have a wonderful summer, and we'll talk to you soon, Saskatoon.